Okay. I should be streaming. I should be streaming. Let me hold on. Turn on my screen. There we go. Hi everybody. Nice to see everybody. Um yeah. I'm excited to get started doing some live research. I have no idea if anybody wants to see this, but yeah, we got some people. Oh, Aspen the Great is your first time watching the Great Libamanka. Okay, all right, if you say so. This is Zotero. My professor just told me about it. It's great. I've been having so much fun using it for research recently, and I'm gonna be using it forever. Yeah, welcome. I'm not gonna jump into the article just yet, but yeah, this is gonna be a fun article. I was looking at this on I think Tuesday is when I was looking at this. Um, yeah, it's oh oh my God. Hold on. What is this article? This is basic level categorization and meaning in language by Gábor Győri. I tried my best to not butcher it, but I know I did because I am not good at pronouncing Hungarian. I used to be able to pronounce it based on reading it, um, kind of, but I've lost all that information. This research is for my linguistics capstone project, but it's also for just for fun and for maybe I'm gonna make a video. Yeah. Um, where was I last time I did this? I think I had finished this section. I think I was over here. Um, yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm also So how do you research this? Like taking notes? I mean, most of it is just I'm reading the article, but this is my first time annotating using Zotero, which is this new app I've gotten. So it lets you highlight things, and then you can like um, well, you should be able to put a note on things, but I don't. Oh, here we go. Note annotation, add text. Okay, so I can put a note here and be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And then I can add a tag and be like, wow. I'm not gonna put that note though. Um, I sound really tired. That's because it's been a tired couple of days, but also just I'm nice and cozy and I'm about to do some research. Yeah, but yeah, I'm tired. I am sleepy. Let's see. Let's read some. The cognitive function of language is to serve as a device for providing a symbolic model of the world, which can be operated in various ways of deriving knowledge from adaptive interaction with our intricately complex physical, social, and cultural environment. Okay, so this is a definition. So I'm gonna use green for that definition of the cognitive function of language. Cognitive function of language. Yeah. Now I'm going to put it in my own words. I'm also going to add a tag definition. I have no idea if I'm going to keep using Zotero like this, but I'm trying it out. I'm trying it out. Excited, excited about this. So the cognitive function of language is to serve as a device, providing symbolic, providing a symbolic model of the world which can be operated in various ways for deriving knowledge, for an adaptive interaction with our intricately complex physical, social, and cultural environment. So let's try to break this down. Um, so we're talking about the cognitive function of language. So it's talking about what does language do in the brain? What does language do for the brain? Um, and what's saying is that a symbolic model. Um, so by symbolic, I think it's like uh, symbolic model is going to be like we have symbols around us and we interpret these. So it's like uh, model is not the same thing as what it's modeling. So that's an important thing about models. Um, is that models will never be the thing that they're modeling. It's a way for us to understand them. So any model that we use in any form of science is going to be different from the thing that it is a model of. And symbolic means that it's like a representative. I'm not really sure what they mean uh, by that. So I guess we might figure it out. When did the cave times people start using language as a function to communicate with others, not just cavemen noise like grunts? Um, I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know much about cavemen in particular. I'm not even sure that cavemen are were real. I think there were many different groups of hominids going around doing lots of things. A very small amount of them found caves and made art in caves and used caves as burial chambers and stuff like that. But I don't think any of them like were quote unquote cavemen. You know, they were just groups of people all over the world, and many groups of people who um, were using caves for various things are pre Homo sapiens. Like I think Homo habilis has like a there's a cave in Western Europe somewhere where maybe Spain I think where it's now closed up, but like hundreds of thousands of years ago, I think Homo habilis basically threw a bunch of bones through an opening in the ground into a cave that's since closed up because of the like tectonic shifting. Um, so that's pretty cool. Those are my thoughts on cavemen. I don't think they're real. I don't think cavemen is a real thing. But like using caves for various things is something that goes back at least hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. And non human animals like non hominid, non primate animals live in caves too. So there's that too. Um, so symbolic model of the world is just like um, uh, hmm, which can be operated in various ways for deriving knowledge from an adaptive interaction with our intricately complex physical, social, and cultural environments. Hmm. Oh, question about did the Neanderthals have languages? Um, in my opinion, there's enough evidence about the origins of language and like the way that language has arisen in humans to say that Neanderthals definitely had some something that resembles human language in some way. They were definitely communicating with each other in a way that's at least similar to the way that humans communicate, but we don't know what their language was capable of. We don't know if it's capable of all the things that human language is capable of. We don't know if human language is capable of all the things that their language is capable of. But like they had something, they had some way to communicate because they were intelligent. They made tools that they used for hunting. Uh, they were able to innovate and make clothing from animals. They formed communities. They were genetically similar enough to humans to procreate with them. So it would be weird if they lacked language, but we don't know anything about the nature of their communication. Um, but we don't have any evidence of writing systems from the Neanderthals. Also, is another thing. Um, so if they did, maybe they wrote things down at some point, but we have no records of it. So if they did, it would be by some sort of means that is very temporary, I guess. Maybe they carved into wood and then the wood rotted. That's a possibility. It might be unlikely. I don't know. Like most cultures throughout history until like the Neolithic Revolution have not really had a need for writing down language with a writing system. An alphabet specifically as a form of writing is very new compared to like older scripts. The first scripts that arise are logographic. Yeah. If Neanderthals had a language, it would probably not just be grunts. No. You need to stop thinking about like this image of a caveman in your head. You need to be thinking about early hominids differently. Anyway, let's go back to this definition. I'm trying to figure out. So it's a model of the world that can be operated on various ways. So language. What does language do? It's to serve as a device for providing a symbolic model of the world. So it's like a tool that we use to understand the world. A tool we use to understand the world, and then we can abstract things about the world, um, and then understand it in a complex way. In a complex way. I'm not super sure about this. It's mine's a little vague, but um, I guess let's just move on. See what we have next. Thus, language must be shaped in a way that best facilitates cognition of this environment. Um, so, language must be shaped in a way that best facilitates cognition of this environment. Uh, this is just saying what the paper was saying earlier, which is that language will kind of follow ease, you know? Um, Also, if you're getting ads, I have my stream open on my phone here on the side, and I'm getting ads. So if you're getting ads and you don't want ads, just get an ad blocker, no problem. Uh, that's the way to not see ads. Um, Let me know if they're like really annoying, and I'll go into settings and make them less frequent. Yeah, yeah. Hence, reality itself is not the exclusive influence on the way language is. So, this is interesting to me. So they got so there are other influences on language, not just reality, right? Okay. So what are the other influences? Because for language to function as an efficient cognitive device, it must be adapted to serve for our specifically human interactions with the world. So reality itself, so the other ones would be like language would impact language, I guess. Um, hmm. Efficiency means that language should provide an interpretation of the world that proves to be adaptive and functional in the given environment. Language should provide an interpretation of the world that proves to be. So what if it doesn't, though, is my question. I'm going to use blue for Tokipona. What if it doesn't do this? Like Tokipona. This functional interpretation of the world will be reflected in linguistic categorization, which is manifest in the semantic structure of the language. Thus, language will impose a particular categorization on the world, which has emerged as a result of Rosch's principles so as to provide an adaptive model. So, this is just describing the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is like the categories that we have in language impact how we see the world. Um, so I can add a note. Um, Sounds like the Sapir or I'm not spelling that right. How do you spell that? Oh my god, who's calling me? Why is someone calling me on the phone? Um. Anyway, I'm probably spelling that wrong. Yeah, Sapir-Whorf. Okay. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Categories in language impact how we see the world. Categorization is a process of sorting various entities into groups, means both the cognitive processes of pattern recognition in our everyday. So it means the cognitive processes of pattern recognition in our everyday interaction with the environment. I'm using yellow for summaries, I think. No, I'm using yellow for thoughts, blue for Tokipona tangents, green for definitions. I'll use red for summaries. Am I using? I'm figuring out how to highlight and take notes on things as I'm doing them right now. So you're watching this process. The cognitive process of pattern recognition in everyday interaction with the environment. So this is like everyday pattern recognition. Everyday pattern recognition. And also that of setting up categories and establishing a category system. So this one's long term. Pattern recognition. So everyday pattern recognition and then also long-term pattern recognition. Rosch's principles applies to this second one, that is to the issue of what categories became coded in language and how this process occurs. Become coded in language and how this process occurs. This latter aspect of categorization is the one I will be concerned with in the following. Latter is going to be long-term pattern recognition. Awesome. Damn, I love this topic. This topic's so cool. Let's see what we have next. One of the most conspicuous functions of language is that it is used for communicating conceptual structures that have been coordinated through speaker-hearer interaction and thus conventionalized in a speech community. This is what's it called? This is cultural categorization. Right. Therefore, categories in language exist basically in the form of word meanings. Thus, semantic structure reflects a particular category system, and through this, a particular way of categorization, language imposes on reality. One of how new meanings and the expressions carrying them arise in a language is through semantic change. It is this historical linguistic process. Was I reading this yesterday? I'm starting to feel like I was reading this yesterday because could have sworn I read this already. Oh, you know what? Yes, I did read this yesterday. Oh my god. Yeah, because I got to the swollen thumb part. Would Tokipona be easy for pirates? No. I can explain this right now. Hoggett's design features. Let's see. Okay. Where's that one there's another page. Hocket. So if we look on this page, there should be yeah, right here. So we have some parrots here. Here's Alex, a gray parrot, and it says what Alex was able to do. What pronouns does Alex use? Um, uh, it's I'm gonna use they them pronouns for Alex because I don't have an answer on that. Um, so Alex was able to do all sorts of things with language. Let's talk about the things he can't do. Alex is unable to talk about objects that Alex cannot see. So if Alex sees a ball and then the ball goes away, Alex can't talk about the ball. That's something that Alex, a gray parrot, was not able to do. Um, Productivity limited. This means that while Alex can talk about a variety of different things and can always talk about more things, Alex can't really do it a lot, like only a little bit. It's There's a limited amount of new things that Alex does talk about in practice. Is my reading of this. Traditional transmission. I'm forgetting what this one is. Traditional transmission, cultural transmission. While humans are born with innate language capabilities, the specifics of language are acquired and learned after birth in a social setting. Significantly, language and culture are woven together. Okay, so what this is saying is that while Alex's communication is impacted by their environment with the humans around them, it's not to the degree of human language. It's more rudimentary. Prevarication. Alex is unable to say something that they do not believe to be true. So Alex can only say things that they think are true. Reflexiveness. Alex was not able to demonstrate that they could talk about their own communication using communication. So Alex can do everything else that humans can do, but Alex can't do those things. At least not to for the limited ones, at least not to the level that humans can. Um, this is a meadowlark, which is a bird, another bird. Um, they can do a bunch of things, but we don't know if they can do everything. Gibbon is that's a monkey. Crickets, that doesn't count. Paralinguistic. Yeah, we don't have any other examples of birds here. Um, but yeah, I hope this helps. If you want to look at this chart here it is. Yeah. Let's go back to the reading. Mm, okay, so I already read most of this. In the case of the novel usage of an expression, both the hearer's understanding and the speaker's own representational process must be enforced. This requires a certain degree of explicitness in the reference. This can be accomplished rather economically by depicting salient features. We were talking about this yesterday. Were we looking at this blending of mental aspects? Since meaning derives from the way human beings make sense of the world, the conceptualizations which underline the meaning are not governed by autonomous linguistic processes, but their operation is based on cognitive mechanisms at any level of cognitive functioning, from perception to complex conceptual structures. Did I read this part? I'm not sure if I did. The emergence of new meanings. The emergence of new. I think this is where I started to lose focus. Um, Yesterday. Lipamanka Sensei. Lamau. I do really like answering questions about linguistics when I know the answer. Um, that's fun for me because I know the answer. The emergence of new meanings and expressions in the course of semantic change is not simply a process of creating a label for a cultural category, but creating the category itself. Oh. So, the emergence of new meanings and expressions in the course of semantic change is not simply a process of creating a label. Okay, so categories do not exist without without ways of conceptualizing them, and language is the way we conceptualize them. Uh, in in the course of semantic change is not the emergence of new meanings and expressions of semantic changes, but creating the category itself. So as words evolve, that's how new categories show up. New categories are created through semantic change. Huh. However, meanings are different from pure categorizations as they are not. So, okay, but the category here, new. New cultural categories. But like within an individual categorization, within an individual organism, categorization does not rely on this. So as far as I can tell, it's just cultural categories that rely on semantic change. New new cultural categories are created through semantic change. Need to be. I don't know what spiel grammar is. However, meanings are different from pure categorizations in that they are not solely the result of cognitive principles of functional and adaptive consideration, but are, to a large extent, shaped by human conceptualizing capacity. So the meanings of words are different from pure categorizations. So meanings of words are different from the categories like in our heads, because they are not solely. This means it's other things. The principles of fun, but also by cultural beliefs. Okay, so that means culture, in addition to pure, in addition to cognitive principles of functional and adaptive categorization. Cognitive principles of functional and adaptive categorization. This is talking about the just like internal categorization. In addition to internal categorization within an organism, impacts the meanings of words. Okay. Cognitive semantics claims that meaning is based on mental imagery and conceptualizations of reality which do not objectively correspond to it, but reflect a characteristic human way of understanding. Which do not objectively correspond to it. So the way we conceptualize the world does not objectively correspond to it, but it's reflected by culture. Okay. I'm not going to ask my teacher to summarize this because this is an article that I found. Because I'm at the stage where I'm finding my own articles to write about for my teacher. And then my teacher reads and gives me feedback, and then I become a better linguist. Thus, one of the basic axioms of cognitive semantics, so this is the field we're working on right now. Field mentioned. Okay. Thus, one of the basic axioms of cognitive semantics. Okay. Um, so this is a definition. What color was I using for that? Was I using green for that? Yeah. Um, actually, um, one axiom of cognitive semantics. Um, Linguistic meaning originates in the human interpretation of reality. Meaning comes from human interpretation. This involves conceptual mappings from familiar domains of experience to unfamiliar or less well understood domains in the form of metaphor, image schema projections, idealized cognitive models. Okay, this is a in the form of metaphor. So conceptual. One sec. Um, this involves conceptual mappings from familiar domains of experience to unfamiliar, less known understood domains in the form. Okay, so so these are methods of mapping the familiar and concrete to the unfamiliar and abstract, it seems. About the nature culture distinction, I'd have to I'd have to ask my professor um what he thinks about it. Since meaning derives from the way human beings make sense of the world, the conceptualizations with which underlie meaning um, are not governed by autonomous linguistic processes, but their operation is based on cognitive mechanisms at any level of cognitive functioning. Their operation. Hold on. Since meaning is derived from the way human beings make sense of the world, meaning. Yeah, so this is what I over here. Oh no, this one. The axiom being meaning comes from human interpretation. So because of that, because meaning comes from human interpretation, um, the conceptualizations with which underlie meaning, so the way that we internalize um, internal categorization. So internal categorizations are not governed by autonomous linguistic processes. These, what are the autonomous linguistic processes, though? But their operation is based on cognitive mechanisms at any level of cognitive functioning, from perception to complex conceptual structures. No, wait, this is the conceptualizations with which underlie meaning. Never mind, I'm going to get rid of this. The conceptualizations with which underlie meaning. So these are the the conceptualizations that underlie meaning. If the meaning of the conceptualizations that underlie meaning, that's like the interpretations of humans, right? Um, which underlie meaning are not governed by autonomous linguistic processes, but their operation is based on cognitive mechanisms at any level of cognitive functioning, from perception to complex conceptual structures. I'm not really sure I understand what this means. Since the meaning derives from the way human beings make sense of the world. So that's our axiom. The conceptualizations which underlie the meaning are not governed by a. I'm struggling with what this means. What does this mean? Maybe I need to look up autonomous. It's like it can do it on itself. Autonomous. Having the freedom to govern itself. Acting in accordance with one's moral duties. So doing something by one's self. Hmm. Hmm. So linguistic processes by themselves. Um, linguistic processes in the brain that operate by themselves. So this is just saying that the interpretations of humans are not based solely on the way we interpret language in our brains, but rely on all sorts of cognitive mechanisms. Okay, so I'm going to delete these and I'm going to summarize this whole thing. Um, because interpretations inform the meanings of words, those meanings are governed by all sorts of cognition and not by some independent linguistic processes. So what it's really talking about is how the linguistic processes in our brains that that inform the interpretations we make around the world are really not just linguistic. So the cognition that informs meaning is not really just linguistic. It's all cognition. So all cognition in the brain impacts the interpretation. The cognition informs the interpretation, which informs the meaning. Is not only linguistic, it's all cognition. Okay. Wow. That's crazy. Although this involves a great deal of subjectivity due to the fact that cognitive processes occur in individual human minds, cognitive practices, okay, meaning is shared, public, and objective in an appropriate sense of objectivity due to human ways of embodied understanding of a shared reality. And also a common conceptualizing capacity. So the way we conceptualize things differs, but meaning is shared. So conceptualization differs between people, but meaning is shared. Okay. All right, awesome. Meanings and conceptual phenomena and their changes. So the changes of meanings and conceptual phenomena are largely dependent on general cognitive mechanisms, like, for example, associations, due to their open-ended and encyclopedic nature. So, like, the way we associate things is like an encyclopedia. So we have a bunch of knowledge, and we associate that knowledge with itself. it's going to expand on that. Cognitive semantics, by incorporating encyclopedic knowledge and conceptualization into semantic structure, has made considerable progress in theoretical account for such change. So this is talking about semantic change. Um, and semantic change is informed by our encyclopedic knowledge. So just the facts that we have in our brain, um, and then the way we conceptualize things. If encyclopedic knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge, um, and conceptualization lie at the bottom of changes in semantic structure, it is no wonder. So this is if. So this is like most basic. Fact bank and processing are the most basic aspects of semantic change. If a fact bank, yeah, okay. It is no wonder that knowledge of sociocultural history as speakers of a language is very often indispensable for discovering etymologies and the categorizations behind them. And thus providing the essential individual cases of change of meaning. Um, um, Knowledge of do I need to summarize that even? I should write something. It is no wonder that knowledge of the sociocultural history of the speakers of a language is very often indispensable to discovering the etymology and categorization and the categorizations behind them, thus providing explanations for the individual cases of change in meaning. Knowledge of culture helps describe semantic change. Yeah, okay. It is especially true in the case of semantic change. Okay. At, that a proper understanding of language change requires that we recognize language as an object of sociocultural evolution. As already mentioned, the familiar knowledge that can be explored can be exploited for new categorizations, and creating new meanings resides in conventional expressions and in connections or encyclopedic information attached to them by the speech community. However, even though new meanings emerge on the basis of already existing ones, this does not happen in propositional form most of the time. So what this is saying is that usually semantic change is not driven by coinages. And I'm going to my Tokipona one from earlier, I'm going to just add a Tokipona tag. And then I'm going to add that same tag to this one. Even though it's not directly it's not just relevant to Tokipona, I'm going to add the tag so I can see it later. Great. Since the meaning changes a highlighted salient property, will evoke others due to high correlational structure of phenomena. So this is like when semantic change is happening and we're pivoting on like the most salient feature, other features will come with it because we associate them, but like that's just like a byproduct that just happens anyway. That's not something our brains are focusing on. So maybe that's where connotations come from. In most cases, it will yield emergent properties in the combined concepts. Oh wait, I should probably wait, no. might be where connotations come from. This may sometimes be compositional. In most of the cases, will yield emergent properties in the combination in the combined concept, which do not derive from either of the combining concepts. Okay. The reason for this is that the inputs to a conceptual blend are rarely mental representations of classical categories, but rather mental spaces construed by speakers on the basis of encyclopedic knowledge that have been evoked through current linguistic expressions. Taking this all into consideration, it is also understandable why the same conceptual avenue for categorizing and conceptualizing a phenomenon will often not work in different languages, and why the same metaphorical or metonymical transfer may be cognitively plausible in one language but not in another. This is directly relevant to a video I'm making. Um, uh, Different semantic changes may only make sense for some languages and this is because it's driven by different speaker groups. My current percentage of brain break is 7% broken. Thank you for asking. Different semantic changes may only make sense for some languages. Different speaker groups have different encyclopedic knowledge. Therefore, which directly influences semantic change. Yeah. Okay. Due to complexity of the human environment, specifically in the intellectual realm, our conceptual structures include categories and types of knowledge of a vast array of abstract and virtual entities. In these cases, because of the lack of perceptual attributes, functional, cultural, and encyclopedic knowledge may play a more relevant role in categorization. Let's see. Okay. I had something. In these cases, because of a lack of perceptual attributes, functional and cultural encyclopedic knowledge play a much more relevant role in categorization. What this is saying is for abstract concepts, functional, cultural, and encyclopedic knowledge impact semantic change more than for concrete concepts. At the same time, these being results of the human conceptualizing capacity, we seem to be able to form mental representations about these only with the help of language. We need language to conceptualize abstract things. Okay, that makes sense. Because they are highly dependent on metaphor, including schema projections, idealized cognitive models, and blending of mental spaces, etc. For instance, such entities are, for instance, abstract notations, for example, love, democracy, honor, etc. Imaginary, imaginary ideas, spirit, fairy, uh, and also superordinate categories, furniture, animal. Oh, levels of categorization. Yeah, awesome. What are the dubious claims in your opinion? I would love to hear what the dubious claims are. I think this might be the same paper, Flaming Fish. Um, because this was the one I was reading yesterday. Um, but like if I'm thinking, oh, not convinced that language is necessarily to form representations of these things. Oh, I guess I don't know whether or not it's necessary to form representations of these things, but it's the only reason we have evidence that humans can do it. And we have no evidence that other animals can't do it, other animals that lack language, right? The only way that we would have evidence of it is if they were able to use language. And I think also what this paper is saying is that um, it also says that these aren't exclusively linguistic processes. Um, this only with the help of language part is kind of contrasting with what was it over here? The autonomous linguistic processes, right? It's kind of like at odds with itself. Because the conceptualizations with underlying meaning are not governed by autonomous linguistic processes, but their operation is based on cognitive mechanisms at any level of cognitive functioning. So what this little bit is saying is that uh, semantic meaning, like the language is not the only thing that influences this. But then down here we have language is the thing that allows this to happen. So that's a little confusing. Professor Woody recently did a language video about why animals don't speak any language. I might look at that at some point. Mm. At odds with the above, not governed by autonomous linguistic processes. On the other hand, basic level categories, I gotta highlight this as levels of categorization. Uh, Basic level categories appear to rely on perceptual attributes to a much greater extent. However, these categories, emerging in languages as basic level terms and constituting constituting and constituting linguistic meaning, should also be affected by the human conceptualization capacity. So these categories being the basic categories like chair and stuff. Um, these categories emerging in language as basic level terms. So this is just saying like how these concepts that we have in our brain surface as levels of categorization in the basic category like chair, um, but not like snow cone machine. And and constituting linguistic meaning should also be affected by human conceptualization capacity. So the degree to which the reason why we have basic categories is because of the human conceptualizing capacity. We have basic categories. We have so many basic category words. That doesn't make any sense. These categories, basic level categories, okay, these categories emerging as in language as basic level terms and constituting linguistic meaning should also be affected by human conceptualizing capacity. To what extent this is the case is the issue I will turn to in this next section. Okay. What? So, okay, what issue is this guy turning to in the next session? Győri? Győri, what are you talking about? So, um, so maybe okay. These categories emerging in linguistics. This is the guy who wrote this paper. Let's just read on, see what we can find. The cognitive salience of basic level categories. It's up here. It's spelled like this. Győri. The GY is a palatal voice palatal stop, I believe. Győri. So it's not G, it's G, which I might be doing not Hungarianly. An important function of a category system is to provide a taxonomy for the entities categorized, that is, to show their super and sub-orienting relations. Okay, so vertebrates is superordinate. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, these are all basic. But then these ones feel basic to me, these ones down here. Like dog and cat feel very basic. So let's see, this is about taxonomy. It will be very, if we take a look at such taxonomy of things, it will be very obvious that certain levels are more fundamentally linked to sensory experience than others. Interestingly, this is not necessarily always the same level. For instance, in the biological taxonomy of vertebrate animals, fish in general have quite prominent common visual characteristics, as opposed to vertebrates. Oh, because like when you think fish, you think about images. So fish is a basic term, but vertebrate isn't. But the other vertebrate characters aren't, except for maybe birds, in my opinion. While the state of affairs can be found one level lower in the case of cats as opposed to mammals. In line with this observation, Rosch claims that there is a level of categorization of reality, the basic level, at which we make categorizations on the basis of natural discontinuities found in nature. Okay. Okay, time to summarize this. Basic category is based on natural discontinuities in nature. I think what this whole paper is saying, though, is that the basic category is based on what was it? Something economy, cognitive economy, right? So the using words of the basic category is the most cognitively economic way to talk about things, which is why we have all this evidence that our cognition works better for basic level categorization or something. In other words, we distinguish the entries that show maximal category resemblance with each other and minimal and minimal with words um, based on gestalt perception, as well as motor movements and behavioral functions connected to them. What? Okay, now I don't understand because they're saying in other words and then they say a bunch of stuff that I don't get. Which, like, what? What does that mean? Okay. Categorization above this level has no direct empirical ground, and even categorization below the basic level is not necessarily grounded in perceptual qualities, but often involves knowledge more than the types of basic level categorization it is based on. Okay, so categorization. So, superordinate concepts are abstract and not based on direct observations and natural discontinuities. And even categorization below the basic level is not necessarily grounded in perceptual qualities. And this is subordinate. Hold on. Superordinate concepts. Subordinate. How do I phrase this? Are abstract. Subordinate concepts are rooted more in encyclopedic knowledge then what was that term? Natural discontinuities. Among others, also have some type of expert sociocultural knowledge. Thus, whereas frogs are relatively easily identified on the basis of their average shape, for determining that a living creature is an amphibian, or that a particular frog, a subordinate category, okay, I already know this word, that's good, belongs to a certain species of frog, some knowledge of biology is inevitable. In the case of human artifacts, the situation is no different. For example, tables are such and such are easily recognizable purely by their shape. Okay, this is Tokipona. I have Tokipona thoughts about this. Okay, Tokipona. Tokipona kind of changed the way I conceptualize furniture, I think. Like tables and chairs are like together now. Huh. So this is really good precedent. This is really good precedent for the study I want to do. The experiment I want to do on Tokipona speakers, because if for me, like reading this paper, I find myself disagreeing that grouping together like tables, chairs, and like beds is like requires extra knowledge. Since learning Tokipona, if I disagree with that, or like if since learning Tokipona it's no longer abstract because I'm only relying on like a few semantic pieces of information, then that could Tokipona could genuinely affect cognition, um, like in a really interesting way. I'm researching I'm researching levels of categorization and um, how human cognition might be affected by Tokipona, because Tokipona only has words that are superordinate, which means Tokipona's the only words that exist in Tokipona have like really big semantic spaces, and a very low level of specificity that in other languages, what I'm learning is that for other languages, basically all of the translations for the words in Tokipona would need to be based on some level of like technical knowledge or abstract thinking, because it groups together a lot of things that are not, um, from a perception perspective, in the same category. Like beds and tables are not immediately, obviously, in the same category to humans because we use them very differently. But to a Toki Pona speaker, um, automatically all surfaces that kind of face upwards that are used become like the same conceptual space. And my question is that just a feeling I have or something that I want to be true? Or if I actually test this in an experiment, will Tokipona speakers be able to categorize these things faster than people who don't speak Tokipona? And that's a really interesting question, and that's what I want to figure out. Yeah. Um, Apples are not a kind of fruit. The semantics of human category. I gotta read that one too. This is so cool. This is so cool. Roche also claims that objects are first seen or recognized as members of their basic category and only with the aid of additional processing. Okay, so this is something that I'm gonna have to cite. Um, cite. I need to cite this. Um, um, Probably in the original Rosch paper. Some quantitative evidence would be really nice. No, I do not want to do something else. I want to do this. Please and thank you. This is obviously due to the fact that it is mostly perceptual features that dominate this level of categorization. Or, in other words, categorization at this level is largely based on the way humans perceive the world in terms of sensory input. That makes sense. So, like, when you look at chairs, all chairs kind of look more similar to each other than they do to tables. So the question that I have is, does Tokipona genuinely change the way you see the world to the point where you ignore the visual categorization and are automatically thinking about the function of furniture to distinguish if it's like boki or supa? And the answer might be yes, and the answer might be no. And either way, it will be really interesting to figure out, because if the answer is no, then it means that um, Tokipona there's no good evidence that Tokipona does affect cognition, and then that's the thing I can say. Tokipona does not affect cognition. Uh, After learning Tokipona, all the participants of my study, still had the same reaction times to words of different categories. But if it's true, then that might kind of put a wrench in this field, because here we have a bunch of people who have kind of overcome this cultural value that or like use cultural values to overcome like the way the human brain naturally works, probably in a very minor way. I'm not making a language. I'm talking about Tokipona, which is a language that was already made 25 years ago. It just has a bunch of speakers, so it's something that we can actually test. If I was to make a language, I would need to find a lot of people willing to learn it, and then that's a lot of effort for them, and then it just wouldn't be as interesting a study. Um, this is obviously due to the fact that it's more spatial, blah, blah, blah. Okay, categorization at the levels above and below this one requires the processing of functional features. Okay, the processing of functional features. This is also something with Tokipona. Um, Tokipona needs this more. Does more practice with this make Tokipona speakers more able to focus on functional features? Or does Tokipona remain maintain a larger cognitive load on speakers than other languages because it lacks basic category words? So I think it's because like our brains have evolved to perceive things much before it evolved. Our brains evolved to be able to kind of like tie encyclopedic knowledge into those things. That's the reason why our brains are able to process basic category um, words than words of other categories. And then my question is, does Tokipona offer people practice in processing functional features? And is that effective? Does that actually change um, reaction speeds to information? Does that change the cognition? Is there a difference in cognition between Tokipona speakers speaking Tokipona and non-Tokipona speakers not speaking Tokipona? Or even those same Tokipona speakers speaking non-Tokipona? Um, I think that if I tried to test non-Tokipona speakers speaking Tokipona, that wouldn't be helpful because they don't speak the language. But I'm gonna get people with all sorts of proficiency levels in Tokipona and people who've memorized the vocabulary without any practice using it in context. So I might actually be able to test that as well. Um, my assumption is that memorizing the vocabulary will not have a profound impact on cognition because there's no practice. Anyway, I have to use the bathroom, so I'm gonna be back in a little bit. Okay, see you all in a few minutes. And I'm back. Welcome back, everybody. How many of y'all stayed? Nice. Oh, we're talking about, is it possible for me to speak a romance language and talk about myself without revealing my gender? Acho que é. Sou lipa manca. Falo português pouco. Sou da Nova York. Ah, eu gosto muito ah, das línguas. Uh, yeah. Yeah, there we go. I only know English. I'm a monolingual English speaker who only speaks English and no other languages. Yeah. Okay, back to the paper. Is this okay? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on. Oh my god. Oh my god. Whoa. Wait. Hold on. This cited work right here by Viets Bika or something. Words Bika. I think I have the physical book right here. The physical book in my physical hands. It says it's 1985 actually, so it's a different book by the same person. Never mind. But there's a picture of a bicycle on the front. One second. Let me look at the table of contents. Fruits and vegetables, cats and dogs, cups and mugs, bikes and cars. Wow, I can't believe I have this book. It's not directly the same thing, but it probably talks about some of the same things. It has pages dedicated to like defining carrots, a kind of thing that people eat. Imagining things of this kind, people could say these things about them. They grow in the ground. People cause them to grow in many places because they want to have them for people to eat. And that's like most of this book is like that and then commentary about it. Really interesting. That definitely written by the same person. Likely not the same book because this one was written 5 years after the citation is. Unfortunately, apples are not a kind of fruit. Wait a minute. 1984. This came out in 1985. Hold on. Is there... Yeah, there's a chapter about fruits and vegetables. The semantics of human categorization. Oh. I do have the physical book with me. I have the physical book that this is citing. I've read this book before. I haven't read the whole thing. I've skimmed it. Oh my god. Okay. Wow. 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 I don't even know what to say. We can continue. Wait, no, I can look at the page number. 313. Distinguishes between taxonomic and non-taxonomic concepts. This is oranges continued. This is a continuation of the previous page, which is about oranges. So this might not be the same book. Yeah. So maybe not the same book. Because I'm looking at page 313, and it's oranges continued. The top ends of these parts are all in the same place, and the middle of the top, uh, and their bottom ends are all in the same place in the middle of the bottom. When one separates them from one another, one can see that the part where the two ends, the part between the two ends is thin, and that the thin parts of all these parts are all in the same place in the middle of the bottom. This reminds me of the Bible. This description of oranges reminds me of like the description of the tabernacle. That's really funny. Is anyone still watching? No, nobody's watching. I'm kidding. There are 9 of you. I don't know how this happened. I don't know why y'all are watching my mind break over like fruit now. Wow. I need to charge my goddamn phone. Because I got places to be, people to see later today. Okay, so she distinguishes between taxonomic and non-taxonomic concepts, where the former stands for all kinds of things which is imaginable. Stands for a kind of thing which is imaginable, can be represented pictorially, or has a particular function, like a toy or a weapon. Recognizing objects primarily at the basic level appears to be a fundamental human cognitive predisposition. I should move my microphone back to me so that you can hear me better. It's like reading cool research myself, but offloading the hard work. Okay, I mean, like, I'm here to entertain you, I guess. Um, Maybe if I do this enough and well enough, eventually I can make some sort of like a major side hustle out of it. It's a minor side hustle at the moment, but I'm gonna keep doing it. Recognizing objects primarily at the basic level appears to be a fundamental human cognitive predisposition relying on the operation of learned innate feature detectors that pick up the invariant features of objects and even categories from their sensory perceptions and yield categorical representations. So this is another thing I gotta look at. The symbol grounding problem. Apples are not a kind of fruit. I should read much more than I do papers. But I think after this semester, I'm going to be like, yeah, I read exclusively linguistics papers. Yeah, I'm not mentally healthy. Okay, on the basis of the above, it seems obvious that the psychological relevance and the special status of basic level categories derives from the fact that basic level categorization is a universal. So this is a fact. Okay. This is a fact, apparently. But what about Tokipona though? Because it don't have that. And like I guess in order to really test this to see what would happen if a speaker didn't speak any language except for Tokipona, we would need to do bad ethics and raise someone who only speaks Tokipona, and that's not ethical. But if we can get data on Tokipona changing non-native speakers' cognitions, we can assume that will have a greater impact on a native monolingual Tokipona speaker than it does on other people, which is not necessarily a negative impact, but we have no way of knowing that. An inability to use basic level terminology as a child, which, like, by the way, during language acquisition, children, the first words that children learn are in the basic category, which Tokipona doesn't have any words in the basic category. So it like when babies are learning words, their minds are latching on to things that they can perceive. Like they learn that mama means the person whose face is there. The face, that's mama, you know? Um but as soon as these words are that they're as soon as every single word that they're learning is abstract, they're like not able to tie it to reality. Um so now I'm actually more worried uh about a monolingual Tokipona native speaker than I was before. However, I do still think it's plausible that Tokipona could be learned natively by a baby, in addition to other languages. Um, but it might not be. I think that that's something we've taken from granted, is that it's possible for babies to pick up on superordinate words when during L1 language acquisition. Um, but they don't for a while. So, is it possible to learn Tokipona natively? Is it possible? Not has it happened, but is it possible? And I know many people who are in the Tokipona spaces who are planning to have children and might speak Tokipona to the children. Um, so we might get an answer at some point. We might get a proof of concept native Tokipona speaker, but we might not. It might not work. Is Tokipona that distant from perceptual features? Yes and no. So Tokipona only has superordinate words, and what this paper is claiming is that superordinate words are distant from perceptual features because they rely too much on like knowledge of what things go into the category instead of being like a shape you recognize and say, this is the word for something of that shape or of a similar shape. Um, but then also like other languages have words that have multiple meanings. But then do babies learn those individual meanings as separate words in their heads? Like if a word has different senses, does a baby learn those different senses as separate lexical entries in their heads, even though they sound the same? Or does it impact the way they think about them? Hmm. Like, yes, Tokipona words do have perceptual features, but they refer to a lot of things with different shapes. Um, like, like tree in English is a basic level category term because trees have very similar shapes to each other. So when you see a tree, you know it's a tree, and then babies can pick up on that. But gasi in Tokipona can refer to like any plant, and I think that there's a reason why nobody's first word is plant. My first word was duck. I'm not like other girls. My first word was something cool like duck, and duck is a basic category term. It's also monosyllabic, um, so that helps. But duck is just something I saw, and I was probably conceptualizing it as a duck, and that's like a shape I saw as a kid was like, that's a duck. But then also like duck is like not basic because bird is the basic category, right? Because like birds physically are shaped usually similarly to each other. Um, but maybe it's just like I was thinking that duck meant bird on the water. So if I saw a swan, I might have said duck at that time. So I guess I have more questions about the implications of child language acquisition and these categories. So I'm gonna write that here. Look into child language acquisition and levels of categorization and cognitive science and all that jazz. Yeah. So duck is like palm or something. But I'm for me as a baby, because it was my first word that I said, it must have been basic category for me in the time. And I think it's plausible to assume that like as a baby I was saying a word that represented like a physical shape that I was used to seeing. You know? Even if like for adults it's not basic. Yeah, it's definitely a spectrum of categories. Or a spectrum of levels of categorization. But I think it's valid to say that Tokipona lacks basic level categorization words because of how big its semantic spaces are. Maybe it would be worth it to go through the entire lexicon and be like, is this word basic? No, it can refer to all of these shapes that are not similar to each other. Like go can refer to paste, dough, but then also like salt, sand. Um, None of these things, like a lot of these things, do not resemble each other at all. So I perhaps so, but are we defining basic level categorization as a word that describes a bunch of things that are visually similar to each other, or is there more to it than that? Is that just like one perception of it? Something to look into. Even mentally impaired children have been showed to have a basic grasp to have a grasp of basic level categories without language, while they cannot handle categories at other levels. Oh, um, this might be interesting. I'm gonna put autism here because this is a useful piece of information when autism comes up in conversation, especially like the concept of nonverbal people. And I would really like to read this paper. Memory, language, and intellectual ability in low functioning autism. I guessed right. I guessed right. Okay. All right. Also, someone tell Jan Olivia about this. I think she'd be ecstatic. Maybe I should tell her. I don't know, because like that she studied linguistics and she was maybe gonna go into like studying autism and linguistics. So this would be right up her alley, or maybe she's even seen it before. I don't know. Since categorization at the basic level relies mainly on perceptual attributes and common motor movements, it is to be expected that the basic level perception of the world structure. Is this what? Yeah, this is where I was. Um, will engender. What the fuck does engender mean? Whenever I see that word, I'm like gender. So I've forgotten. Cause. Why not just say cause? Cause. Yeah. It is to be expected that this basic level perception of word structure will cause categories that exhibit um, a significant degree of universality across cultures. So what this is part of saying is that basic level category words have some level of universality across the world. Um, I'm gonna put universal as a tag, and then Tokipona because Tokipona does not have a um, basic level categories as far as I can tell. Although categorization, uh, I use a font with serifs. My eyes turn into sharp triangles when I read Times New Roman for too long. Damn. I don't know. This is just the default font for the this app, and I'm able to read it. So, although categorization is a non-linguistic cognitive operation. Mm, this is kind of a definition. Definition. Categorization is not linguistics. The existence of And the existence of basic level categories is in itself not necessarily a linguistic matter, but a psychological cognitive one. When considering the universality of basic level categories, the issue of language cannot be left aside. I agree. I think that language is important when thinking about levels of categorization, especially because, and this paper mentions this earlier, but language is the only way that we actually know about categorization because if our brains categorize things differently, it's much harder for us to observe that than it is to observe through language. And we can use language to see what categories exist within a culture, and then potentially like within an individual. Because in order to engage in a culture's categorization, you need to have that categorization internalized or something. Um, for an experimental investigation, okay, of such bases, um, I'm gonna put site, and then my comment's going to be experimental data. Yeah. Found in 2 experiments on memory for story material that participants tended to remember basic level terms from the super and subordinate ba- base tended to remember basic level terms for the super and subordinate ones they had been presented with, and concluded that basic level categories have conceptual primacy in their effects on memory. Also, so this is making me think about conceptual economy again, which, if you remember, is like your brain doesn't want to be spending too much information to be thinking about things. So perhaps tying these tying concepts to the parts of the brain that are much older and much better developed, like the ones related to sight and uh, tactile sensations, is is much more efficient than tying it to the parts of the brain that have only developed recently, like the ones that allow us to have abstract thought. Um, because our ability to see evolved, I think, like at least tens or at least hundreds of millions of years ago, if not at least a billion, right? Maybe? I'm not sure. Maybe the eye evolved multiple times. I don't remember, but like our like brains have been evolving to see for so long, and it's so ingrained that if your mind can offload semantics to your occipital lobe, it probably will, right? So that just makes sense, right? Um, if your brain can offload semantic labor onto your occipital lobe. I spelled that wrong. No, not occidental. Did I spell it right? Yes, I did. Cognitive economy. Because the occipital lobe is much older and stronger than like human specific brain pathways that let us do complicated thinky stuff. Which is why it's easier to think about some concepts than others, probably. I wonder how much this is involved in like ableism, because I think that this could be used to justify ableism against like a lot of autistic people. But also, we could just not use it for that. Maybe it's true, and we don't have to be ableist towards people. Or we can acknowledge that all of us struggle with thinking about things that our brains have only recently developed to think about, instead of things that our brains have been evolved to think about for much longer. Like, I bet that a cat would struggle with superordinate concepts, but not with basic level category concepts, probably, right? Probably. Probably. Found in two experiments on memory for story material. Oh, yeah. Also, the developmental corollary of basic level categorization, according to which basic objects are the first categorizations of concrete objects made by children. I need to cite this. Cite. Is not necessarily a question of language development. It has been suggested that the acquisition of such categories may precede its linguistic expression in the child. Like, when I was, like, before I said duck for the first time, I was probably thinking about duck as a category of things. And then when I said duck, I had already been thinking about it as a category for a while, maybe. Um, Although the tangible manifestation of the acquisition of a category is the proper usage of its linguistic expression by the child. The tangible what? Although the tangible manifestation of the acquisition of a category is the proper okay. This is another thing that's like the only way that we can actually measure the categories that we're able to conceive of is by looking at language usage. We can't observe categories or categorical thinking in any other way yet. Maybe we never will, because it's probably like too complicated to measure with like a device, you know? Like, you probably can't do a brain scan to see how people conceptualize birds. Maybe. Maybe that would be interesting. I don't know. I'm not a cognitive scientist, I'm a linguist. Um, However, there are other indications of the fact that basic level categorization is not dependent on the language, obviously due to its overwhelming reliance on perceptual features. It has been shown that animals, especially birds and mammals, are capable of categorizing objects in their environment. Um, this guy here considers the ability to categorize so fundamental among animals that he attributes adaptive value to it. Oh, we have a okay. Complex eyes evolved multiple times in different whatever, but the first basic eye fossils are 500,000,000 years old. Okay, yeah. So eyes have been around for much longer than uh, superordinate and subordinate categories, I think. And I think that as soon as creatures evolved eyes, they started to develop the ability to um, categorize things into basic categories. Maybe, I don't know. Furthermore, um, they precede the brain. That makes sense. Um, but like once we got brains, the brains probably started to do stuff with the eyes, you know? Um, Furthermore, experiments conducted with apes on the labeling of objects showed that they learned and used labels for basic level objects easily, while labeling superordinate categories is a very difficult, though not impossible, task for them. Okay, I need to cite this. Cite. Or at least read it, you know? I don't want to have the same citation list as this paper, but if I read all of these papers, then my citation list will be more complete. You know? Or I could just cite this one paper and be like, look at all these other papers it cites. But then that's like too meta, you know? Basic level categories seem to be available without any symbolic representation. Oh, symbolic. Where's the first time symbolic came up? Symbolic model. Oh, that's like how words. So the symbolic part is like symbolic is arbitrariness. So that's like how language is arbitrary. I think that's what symbolic means there. Okay, great. Basic level categories seem to be available without any symbolic representation, also to apes. Um, and it is only the matching of categories and levels that have to be learned. Oh, categories and labels that have to be learned. Okay. However, in the case of superordinates, labeling must most probably go hand in hand with the formation of the conceptual category. Which is like what they were saying earlier. Which is what were they saying earlier? Labeling must most probably go hand in hand with the formation of the conceptual category. So, words for new categories show up at the same time as the categories. Yeah, okay. Children's acquisition of the names of basic objects prior to names for categories above and below that level may also be influenced by the fact that basic level names for different items appear in the most useful and most used ones as compared to other elements of the lexicon. This usefulness and frequency is obviously connected to the already mentioned dominant cognitive status of basic level categories, according to which objects are first recognized as members of such categories, and also to their psycholinguistic relevance as elementary symbols grounded in categorical representations. In essence, as the names of object and event categories assigned on the basis of their categorical representations. Okay, I was just spacing out what's going on. The usefulness and frequency is obviously connected to the already mentioned cognitive status. Dominant cognitive status. Oh, so this is just like our brains process basic level things more dominantly. According to which objects are first recognized as members of such categories, and also to their psycholinguistic relevance as elementary symbols grounded in categorical representations. For example, or in other words, as the names of object and event categories assigned on the basis of their categorical representations. Okay, sure, whatever. This is why children first learn the name basic level categories. Learn and name basic level categories. It is here, in the process of word acquisition, in linguistic ontogeny. I don't know what that word means. The branch of biology that deals with ontogenesis. Okay, but what's that? The development of an individual organism or anatomical or behavioral feature. Oh, so this is like linguistic ontogeny is just language acquisition. Okay, where the emergence of elementary where the emergence of elementary symbols is the most obvious. The child first learns the symbols for the categories and then gets into physical contact with and can most easily distinguish on perceptual grounds. Thus, the meanings of these words are indeed empirically grounded because they are connected to categorical representations based on perception. Yeah, it is funny that the author says obviously. Because, like, is it though? I don't think most people think about cognitive psychology or cognitive science, like, at all. Okay, this is the meat and potatoes of the paper, probably, is my guess. Oh, I have a half hour until I have to go, because I have things to do. Okay. In language, basic level categories are expressed with basic terms, but words and their meanings are not simply labels. They are symbolic representations. conceptual categories containing not only... Let's make this a definition. Definition. Words equals not labels, just labels, and words equal symbolic representations of conceptual categories. Wait, this is all the jargon that they've built up to this. Not only perception. Representations of categories of all kinds. Yeah, okay, that's good enough for me. This is obviously, he did it again, the basic reason why children learn words from super and subordinate categories only after they have acquired the names for basic ones, especially because naming is the best indication of the child of a coherent for the child of a coherent nature of a category. Oh, so that the way we know that a child has a coherent categorization is if they use a label for it and the label's consistent with like themselves and others, maybe. This is especially important in the case of categorizations that are not in accordance with natural discontinuities. Oh, so like categorizations that group some types of chairs with some types of dogs, but not other types of chairs and not other types of dogs, maybe. As like a more like as like an obvious example of what this means, I think. The categorization of furniture draws upon some cultural based knowledge of housing, while the symbolic representation of kitchen chair is anchored in the knowledge that some chairs, not necessarily perceptually different from other chairs, are used in kitchens. Non-perceptual features non-perceptual features are those that imply other knowledge that can be gained through sensory, visual or olfactory, etc., information or perception of motion. With the help of words, we can represent non-perceptual information about basic level categories as well as construct super and subordinate categories, often dependent on knowledge of cultural tradition, function, origin, etc., and not only on perception. Okay, I'm going to reread that that sentence. With the help of words, we can represent non-perceptual information about basic level categories. So this is displacement, right? Displacement. Or abstraction. As well as construct super and subordinate categories as often dependent on the knowledge of cultural tradition, function, origins, etc., not only on perception. In connection with the relation between basic level categories and language, Rosch also speculates that in the evolution of languages, names evolve first for basic level objects, spreading both upward and downward as taxonomies increase in depth. So languages start with basic level and spread up and down. But Tokipona starts with superordinate category terms and does not spread because the lexicon is resistant to gaining new words. Hold on, where was I? Yeah. Um, this appears to be rather logical on the following grounds. Harned distinguishes symbolic representations from the already mentioned categorical ones and claims that the former are grounded in non symbolic representations. Um, so, symbolic representations are grounded in non symbolic representations. So, they are derived from sensory representations through symbol composition. An X is a Y that is Z. This logic seems to be verified by the definitions given by dictionaries for most super and subordinate words. Webster's new collegiate dictionary defines the lexeme furniture in the following way: movable articles used for readying a room for occupancy or use. Thus, in terms of symbol comparison, furniture is movable articles that are used for relaying a room occupancy or use. So, in order to give a definition of a word that is not in a basic category, you need to use words from a basic category. Makes sense? Um, um, non abstract words are defined by basic category words and therefore are likely made up of basic level categorizations, I think. In Harnard's terminology, furniture is thus a high order symbol and, as such, is grounded in elementary symbols because symbolic representations consist of symbolic strings describing category membership relations. What do definitions of other Tokipona words look like using Tokipona? Oh, it's kind of a mess. It does describe things very visually, I think. Like if I wanted to try to use supa without using supa, I would say like, oh, um, these are things that you use every day. Um, you can sit on them, you can work on them. uh, I guess it's like basically the same way as in English, um, but like instead of using I because like mm, but over here like occupancy or use. My brain is 90% broken now. It's broken. My brain is 100% broken. Huh? Thus, in terms of symbol composition, furniture, movable articles. But wait, this isn't basic. So my definition was wrong. Um, sensory representations. Okay. Mm, sensory. Mm, okay, my brain is now only 66% broken. Nice. This is also in line with Weird Speaker's claim, according to which non-taxonomic categories are based on the common function of their members. Oh, what? Hmm. Is anyone still watching? That's insane. I had 11. Wait, I had 12 people at one point. That doesn't make any sense. How's this the world we're living in? Okay. Categorization above the basis. Where was I? Maybe my brain is broken. Yeah, okay. All right, I'm done for now. I'm done reading the paper. I'm going to go do my other obligations now. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah. Yeah. I was productive today, I think. Yeah, before you eat a good fish, just make sure that, like, when you're looking at the fish, like, you're thinking about what is a sensory input and, like, what is your background knowledge about the fish, you know? But yeah, eat a good fish. I think we've all learned about eating a good fish today. Goodbye.